Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome to the War on Gaza report. That's right. Every day here on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, we cover the war on Gaza. And specifically, when we say war on Gaza, we mean that we don't just focus on the bloodshed. We don't just focus on the day-to-day policy developments, although we cover all of that. But when we talk about Israel's war on Gaza, we also make sure to do something that corporate media does not do, that mainstream outlets fail to do, and that is to acknowledge the way in which this particular moment, this particular military incursion represents not a defensive war, but it represents a gross act of disproportionate force that is part of a longer and deeper project to eliminate any chance of Palestinian liberation, Palestinian self-determination, Palestinian freedom, and really Palestinian safety. This is not a war in Gaza. This is a war on Gaza. And we begin the War on Gaza report, as we do every day, with the numbers. At least 38,243 people have been killed, and another 88,243 people have been wounded in Israel's war on Gaza since October 7th. That number of 38,243, of course, is a number that does not consider the 10,000 people who are estimated to be laying under the rubble. That 10,000 number represents many things, not the least of which is a global undercounting of the extraordinary violence that has taken place in the Gaza Strip since October 7th. But it also represents a profound denial of basic human rights to the Palestinian people. People are allowed the right to due process. They're allowed the right to fair trials. They're allowed the right to shelter safely. They're allowed the right to surrender. But they're also allowed the right to a decent and safe, dignified burial. Families have a right to bury their children. People have a right to bury their spouses. Communities have a right to bury their dead. And as they lay under the rubble and access to the bodies under the rubble continues to be obstructed, that 38,243 number, which is much closer to a 49,000 number, represents a large swath of Palestinian people who won't have any kind of closure for their children, for their parents, for their loved ones, for their countrymen. It's something that we want to talk about, something that we need to talk about. All right. Hamas's chief, Ismail Haniyeh, has publicly warned that there will be, quote, disastrous repercussions for truce talks if Israeli, quote, massacres, killings, and displacement continue. As recently as Friday, hell, as recently as Saturday, there was a considerable amount of optimism among the Palestinian people as well as the Israeli government that there would be a truce met, there would be a ceasefire met. And one of the reasons for that optimism was that the non-starters, the non-negotiables, the things that wouldn't be put on the negotiating table were suddenly on the negotiating table. Suddenly, the idea of a permanent, forever ceasefire on Israel's side with a complete withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, Hamas was no longer saying, hey, that has to happen. They want that to happen, but it wasn't a non-starter. There was some talk that there could be some middle ground met. It wasn't clear what that was. And this week, the conversations that were supposed to go on in Egypt and in Qatar were supposed to help us get some kind of insight into what those conversations were. Similarly, one of the conversations that the Israeli government has had is that they need to meet all of their military objectives before a ceasefire is met. And of course, that is nonsensical for anyone who's not Israeli. I mean, if you're a Palestinian, if you're a government official in Palestine or a citizen in Palestine, and you're hearing, oh yeah, we'll do a ceasefire, we'll give you a ceasefire, but only after we meet all of our military objectives, when the military objective is the complete elimination of Hamas. But because Hamas is so deeply entrenched, and because the military logics of the Israeli government are such that almost every male over the age of 16 is Hamas, it seems that it would be a never-ending war. And these are the conversations that have to be had. And there were talks, there were Israeli talks, there were US-led or allegedly US-led talks. There were written documents finally sent to Hamas. Hamas said, hey, we'll do this. And then you had an invasion of Rafah. You saw this again this weekend when suddenly the Nusrat region was invaded. You saw that again this weekend when Khan Yunis was invaded. And when you see such a mass amount of death, it is hard, according to Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas's chief, it is absolutely difficult for Ismail Haniyeh to say that they can move forward with truce talks as they continue to destroy. And that becomes the conversation. And more on those destructive acts this past weekend, the Israeli military has acknowledged that its warplane attacked a school complex in the Nusrat refugee camp, which is in the central part of Gaza. Nusrat, of course, is a site of a school complex that wasn't being used for instruction. Remember, schools have been basically shut down since October. Universities have not only been shut down, but destroyed. Not much education is happening in the Gaza Strip in terms of the formal education system. But these schools were being used for shelter. They were being used for protection. They were being used to procure safety. And the Israeli military attacked that complex. Now, the Israeli military will argue that there were terrorists inside or there was some other military objective being met. But as the data continues to consistently show or not show, there is no clear military objective determined yet by the Israeli government. We'll have to wait to see if there is one that is articulated. But as of now, what we do know is that many teenagers were killed, that many civilians were killed, that many children, not just teenagers, were killed, that adults were killed that were not armed. This was a space where people were sheltering. And one of the challenges is that the Israeli military will say, hey, evacuate if you're innocent. And then the military strike is so quick and the options are so limited that it's almost impossible for the Palestinian people in Gaza to find an alternative space to occupy. So this is all part of the challenge of being in the Gaza Strip at a moment such as this. And again, this is day 277. Patients and staff are fleeing Al Ahli Arab Hospital, as well as the Patients Friends Benevolent Society Hospital, after the Israeli military issued another mass evacuation order. As I said earlier, these mass evacuation orders, sometimes they're for neighborhoods, sometimes they're for housing or medical complexes, and sometimes they're for entire cities. They're often issued, but very difficult to execute in a way that doesn't still lead to large amounts of civilian casualties. We've seen this again from October 8th forward in the north when people were told to evacuate. And then the humanitarian corridors or the safety routes, which were supposed to be protected for, say, 24 hours or 48 hours. According to the reports on the ground that I've heard, including from people working both in hospitals and who are on the ground on the receiving end of the violence, those dictates, leave by this time and you'll be safe, were met by the people who left, but weren't met by the military. So these are things that we have to talk about. This is why there's a global conversation about war crimes. This is why there's a global conversation about a ceasefire, legality aside, just to stop people from dying. But every single day, the death toll goes up. We are seeing an unprecedented amount of violence in the Gaza Strip. We saw Operation Cast Lead, which goes 2008, 2009, in December to January. We're talking about a few weeks. We're talking about a few hundred people. We've seen even a few thousand people killed. We've seen thousands killed in Protective Edge, but nothing that rises to the level of tens of thousands of people in a war that seems to have no end in sight. And the evidence of it comes every single night. For example, at least 9 people have been killed in the Burej refugee camp. That includes 5 children who were just playing in the street. They were just playing in the street. Anyway, we got to go. But one more thing, 10 UN experts have weighed in now. And this has been an argument for months now that the violence we see in the Gaza Strip is matched only by the deprivation of resources. People are not just dying from gunfire. They're not just dying from bombs. They're dying from starvation. They're dying from dehydration. And 10 UN experts have recently announced, according to Al Jazeera, that Israel has mounted a, quote, starvation campaign against the Gaza Strip, saying that there is no denying that famine is occurring there. And if there is a famine, and Israel has such extraordinary control over resources going in and resources going out, then there has to be a conversation about what kind of humanitarian aid is being permitted, what kind of humanitarian aid is being blocked. It's also important, before we go, to talk about the school attacks. I talked about the school attack in the Nusrat refugee camp, which was on Saturday. That's when 16 people died. There was also a refugee camp, a school strike the following day in Gaza City on a church called a church-run school called Holy Family School. That was in Gaza City. That killed 4 people. Then there was another UNRWA school that was hit yesterday, again in Nusrat. And these numbers are disturbing and stunning. And today the numbers get more absurd. The 4th school attack in 4 days has now happened. Dozens of Palestinians were killed in a strike on a school turned shelter, once again, for displaced Palestinians. This strike hit the gate at El Auda Hospital in Evacuation, which is near Khan Yunis. So again, we're seeing the South become another, when Rafah was super dense and packed, and then there was the evacuation and the invasion, the evacuation and the invasion, we saw this kind of instability turn to large amounts of death. And we're seeing the same thing in Khan Yunis, which has continuously been met with the same kind of back and forth. And El Auda Hospital in Abasan, near the southern city of Khan Yunis, was hit at the gate. It's unclear how many people have died. We know dozens, but we don't have an exact number. It's been confirmed that at least 20 people have been killed in the previous attacks, but 4 days, 4 schools, nothing is safe. The rules of war, the rules of humanitarian aid, the rules of just basic human decency, whatever mechanism you're using, from religious law to international humanitarian law, there's just no defensible reason for so many children to die, for so many schools to be destroyed, to be dismantled. This is devastating and indefensible, and we will continue to monitor it. We will continue to put a spotlight on this as Israel's war on Gaza gets dangerously close to a full year. We'll continue to cover it for you right here. But for now, I want to say thank you for watching. I want to encourage everybody to support the channel. Some of you are watching on other platforms. That's cool, but make sure you make your way over to YouTube and hit the like button. Make sure you make your way over to YouTube and hit the subscribe button. That's how we show those corporate media algorithms that we matter and that we are fighting the good fight, and that it's the content that you want. And of course, if you're so inclined, hit the join button. Hit the join button and become a monthly supporter of the channel. By doing so, you allow us to have the economic stability necessary to put out the content that you want to see, to have the content like the War on Gaza report, to have content like Night School, which airs every Monday through Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern time, right here on the channel. It allows us to have the Coffee and Books podcast. It allows us to have office hours where we do intellectual deep dives on Sunday night at 9 p.m. The Classroom in the Cell podcast, of course, is with political prisoner Mumia Abu Jamal. I ask all of you to support the channel, because we need, at this moment, not just me, we need all the radical voices. We need all the grassroots media. We need everybody to hold the powerful accountable. And that's what we do here. And if you don't have the ability to make a monthly commitment right now, make a one-time donation to the channel. You can use Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle. They're all posted right there. And if everybody watching right now were to just donate $5, if everybody were to simply post $5 right now, we would be able to meet our financial goals for the month. I ask you to consider it. But if you can't do that, it's okay. It's not just about the money with us. It's not primarily about the money with us. It's about putting out independent radical media, giving political education, giving complex, nuanced, critical analysis, and doing it in a way that will hopefully play a small part in us getting toward freedom. So let's keep watching. Let's keep fighting. Let's keep studying. And I'll see you tonight at Night School, 9 p.m. Eastern. It is a special one. You don't want to miss it.